The envelope was sitting on my kitchen counter when I got home from work. Plain white. My name typed on the front. Return address from a law office in Greenfield I'd never heard of. I almost didn't open it that night. I was tired. I'd worked a double and my feet hurt, and there was leftover pasta in the fridge I had every intention of eating in front of the TV. But something made me open it. It was a notice of default. My address. My property. A lien I'd never signed for, attached to a home equity line of credit I never opened. $340,000. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs just stopped working. My first thought was that it was a mistake, a clerical error, wrong address, wrong name, some filing crossed in a county database. That kind of thing happens. I told myself that while I was still on the floor. My brother's name wasn't anywhere in that letter. But I knew. Before I made a single phone call, before I pulled a single record, I already knew. My grandmother Loretta bought that property in 1971, a corner lot on the east side with a 2-story house and a detached garage she rented out for 30 years. When she died in 2009, she left it to me. Not to my parents, not to my brother Marcus, to me. There was a reason for that. Loretta knew things about this family she never said out loud. She put them in a will instead. I was 31 when I inherited, appraised at $410,000. I kept the garage rented, used the income to cover taxes and maintenance, and held on to it the way she'd asked me to, carefully. Marcus was 34. He'd been through a food truck, a landscaping company that ended in a lawsuit, and a CrossFit gym he opened during a pandemic. My parents backed most of these ventures quietly, loyally, with a selective blindness I'd learned not to question. He called me the week after the will was read. "She was getting old," he said. "She didn't know what she was doing with that property." I told him she seemed pretty clear to me. He let it go. At least, that's what I thought. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for another 6 years, was that the conversation had already started, just not with me. For 6 years, Marcus had that house in his head. Not on paper, but in family conversations, that Thanksgiving, at my cousin Bria's graduation. That property was the family's unfinished business. My mother brought it up first, about 2 years after the inheritance. She was washing dishes. "Your grandmother didn't understand what that kind of asset could do for this family." I told her Grandma Loretta understood exactly what she was doing. She turned off the faucet. "Marcus needs a real foundation, Diane. That property could be collateral for something real." There it was. Not a request, an opening position. Over the next 4 years, I had some version of that conversation a dozen times. Sometimes an investment property, sometimes a restaurant. Once just a deal he couldn't explain. My father stayed quiet, which I'd mistaken for neutrality. It wasn't. It was patience. The pressure got more organized around year 5. My parents sat me down at the dining room table, the good one, and my father laid out what he called a family plan. Marcus had a property developer interested. There was a catering company in talks. The venue concept had a name, Northgate Event Spaces, and a rough business plan my father had printed out and placed in a manila folder. I looked at that folder and thought, they've been working on this for a while. I told them I wasn't signing anything. My mother said, "We're not asking you to give it away. We're asking you to invest in your brother." I said, "It's not my job to invest in Marcus." She looked at me like I'd said something ugly. "That's a terrible thing to say about your family." That was the first time someone called me selfish to my face. It wouldn't be the last. Then Marcus got engaged. Her name was Paulette, marketing director, organized, calm, the kind of woman who sends thank you notes within 48 hours. I liked her genuinely. The engagement party was at my parents' house, and Paulette pulled me aside near the kitchen and said she hoped we'd be close. She seemed warm and real. Then my Uncle Gerald pulled me aside near the back door. "So you're going to help him with the house now? For the venue?" I looked at him. "What venue?" His face did a small, complicated thing. "Marcus said you two had talked." We had not talked. I pieced it together that night. From my aunt, from cousins, from my mother's careful non-answers. Marcus had been telling people for months that I was signing over the house. He'd told Paulette's family. Paulette herself had been shown a business plan with my property listed as the primary asset. She'd believed it was settled. She thought she was marrying into a real opportunity. I cornered Marcus in the kitchen. "When were you going to tell me about the venue?" He leaned against the counter. "It's still in planning. I was going to bring it to you when things were more solid." "You told Gerald I agreed." "I told him we were in conversations." "We've never had one conversation about this, Marcus." He looked at me and said, "Come on, Diane, you don't even live there." That sentence, like ownership was residency. Like 6 years of protecting that property the way Loretta asked, none of that counted because I wasn't sleeping in the bedrooms. I told him I wasn't signing anything. He said, "Can you just think about it? For the family?" I went home and I did not sleep. The pressure campaign after that was methodical. My mother called on Sunday mornings. My father reminded me Marcus was getting older and needed something real. Bria sent texts about unity and legacy. Gerald told me flat out that the whole family saw how selfish I was being. There was a meeting in December I wasn't invited to. My aunt let it slip afterward. They'd discussed options. My mother apparently cried. My father said he didn't know what had happened to me. Marcus said he just wanted what was fair. I kept saying no. The wedding was set for June. By spring, the venue talk had gone quiet. I thought maybe the worst had passed. I was wrong. I got the default notice in March, 11 weeks before the wedding. I called Carl, a real estate attorney I'd used for the estate years earlier, left a message Thursday night. He called back Friday morning. What followed was the most disorienting 2 hours of my life. The HELOC was real. The account had been opened in my name 14 months earlier at a mortgage company 2 counties over. $340,000 drawn across 4 transactions over 8 months. I asked Carl if there'd been a signature. He said yes. I asked if it was mine. He paused, then said, "That's what we need to establish." We got a copy of the power of attorney. My name, my supposed signature, a notary stamp from the next county. Carl sent it to a document examiner. Back within 24 hours. Not consistent with my known samples. The notary stamp number didn't match any active commission in the state registry. Carefully forged. Not perfectly, but carefully enough to clear an initial review. Then Carl told me the part that made the floor feel like it was moving. The $340,000 was gone, not sitting somewhere, spent. Contractor deposits, equipment, LLC fees, a lease on a commercial kitchen space. The business had been actively building for over a year. Carl said he thought we could get the lien cleared. He said he thought. He wasn't certain. And the person who'd spent 6 years telling the family I was going to hand over that house, who'd built a business plan around it, hired contractors, signed a lease, that person was Marcus. I sat in the parking garage after meeting with Carl and stared at the concrete wall. I thought about the night Loretta told me she was leaving me the house. She'd taken my hand and said, "Some of them are going to come for it. That's why it's yours." I'd thought she was being dramatic. She wasn't. Carl was clear. Tip off Marcus now and evidence disappears. Secure first, confront after. I stopped grieving. I started documenting. Carl filed an emergency motion to void the fraudulent lien. We reported the forged POA to the state attorney general and filed a police report. The mortgage company flagged the account and froze further disbursement. The fraud finding would likely clear the lien, but the timeline was uncertain. Weeks, maybe months. Say nothing. I built a folder 3 inches thick. LLC filings, notary records, transaction histories, the commercial lease, every document with Marcus's name on it. Then I got a wedding invitation. Cream envelope, gold script. Carl told me not to tip them off before the criminal referral was processed. I RSVP'd yes. The weeks before the wedding were strange. I answered text threads about what I was wearing. I talked to Paulette once about centerpieces. White ranunculus, because peonies were too expensive. She was genuinely excited. And I sat there thinking about what she didn't know yet. The morning of the wedding, I woke at 5:30, sat at the kitchen table with coffee. The window was open, and I could smell the neighbor's rose bushes, the same smell from the night I'd stood at that counter holding the default notice, not yet understanding how far the ground had already shifted. Now I understood. The ceremony was beautiful. Paulette cried during her vows. My father cried. My mother pressed a tissue to her eyes and squeezed Marcus's arm. Marcus and I made eye contact once during the reception. He raised his glass. I raised mine. He didn't know the criminal referral had been submitted 4 days earlier. He didn't know the mortgage company's fraud team had already contacted his LLC's bank. He didn't know Carl had served the civil complaint on his registered agent address that morning. Near the end of the reception, Gerald found me. He looked pale. Marcus had gotten a call and stepped outside and hadn't come back in. Paulette was at the head table with a fixed expression and her mother's hand on her arm. I watched her from across the room. She was very still. The kind of still that means you're working hard not to show something on your face. Someone had called Marcus during his own wedding reception to tell him the account was frozen. I don't know who made that call. I didn't arrange it. But I didn't stop it either. The legal process took 14 months. Marcus was charged with first-degree forgery and fraudulent use of a financial instrument. He hired a private attorney. He never contacted me directly. Not once. My mother called in July. You didn't have to take it this far. I asked what the right distance was. She said she'd expected me to handle it quietly, in the family. I told her it wasn't a family matter. It was a crime. She said, "You made it a crime." I held the phone. Then I said, "He forged my signature on a legal document. That was already a crime before I picked up the phone." She hung up. My father called a week later and apologized. Not for Marcus, for her. He said he'd known something wasn't right and hadn't said anything. The most honest thing he'd said to me in years. Paulette filed for divorce in August. She'd discovered the accounts Marcus described as investor-funded were built on the fraudulent loan. She'd signed LLC paperwork without understanding the collateral. Her attorney explained she'd been listed as a beneficiary of a company built on someone else's stolen equity, that the asset Marcus told her was secured had never belonged to him. She sent me a handwritten card, said she was sorry and hadn't known. 3 sentences, small handwriting. I believed her. Marcus pleaded guilty to first-degree forgery in October. 3 years probation. Restitution of $340,000 to the mortgage company, who had already cleared the fraudulent lien.
he was permanently barred from serving as a fiduciary or registered agent in the state. Northgate event spaces never opened. Carl called on a Tuesday morning in November to tell me the lien was cleared. I was at work. I went to the break room and stood by the coffee maker for 5 minutes, just breathing. I still own the house. The garage is rented to a retired schoolteacher named Dorothy, who never pays late. It was reappraised last spring at $487,000. I went over there in the fall to walk through the rooms, stood in Loretta's kitchen. There's a squeaky board near the back door that's always been there. I stepped on it the way I used to as a kid, when she'd be at the stove and say, "I hear you," without turning around. The rose bushes came through the open window. Same smell, same window. Different version of me standing in it. She left it to me because she knew they'd come for it, and she trusted me to still be standing when they were done.